Hi everybody, I'm going to show you a game from the last round of the Geneva FIDE Grand Prix tournament between Peter Svidler with the white pieces versus Hou Yifan with the black pieces. The game started off with the flexible move C4, English opening, E6. Well, this can turn into anything. Knight C3, D5, and now we have some clarity. Now we have some type of Queen's Gambit. Alright. Now what variation of the Queen's Gambit are we going to have? Well, Svidler didn't make us wait and played the exchange variation. And now Hou Yifan played Knight takes D5, which is gaining in popularity. Usual is just simply E takes D5 and Bishop G5 in the exchange variation, and there's many different pathways that black can take, and white has a few plans of his own. But back to the game, after Knight takes D5, the game takes on the flavor of a semi-tarish defense, but with the very important difference here that we're going to get into in this game, and hopefully it will enrich your chess understanding. So Knight takes D5 is played here. Now I want to go back and I'm going to just show you a line from the semi-tarish so you can see the similarity. So here's just a random line right here: D4, D5, C4, E6, Knight C3, Knight F6, Knight F3, C5. There's a semi-tarish, and a critical difference between this line and the line that we're looking at. Notice that Knight has been played to F3 already. So C5, C takes D5, Knight takes D5, E4, Knight takes C3, B takes C3. Again, this is the semi-tarish. C takes D4, C takes D4, and everything is pretty much forced. And this allows black to trade off a few minor pieces. As you saw, the knight get traded off at C3, and now the bishop comes to B4 with check. The main line goes bishop D2, bishop takes D2, queen D2. And even though white has his full center, black has relieved himself of being cramped by trading off two sets of minor pieces. Castle, bishop C4, and this is one of the main lines. Castles, B6, rook AD1, and bishop D7 or bishop D7, just to give you an idea. With you know, a good game for both sides. White has a slight advantage here because of his space advantage, but black has proven that he is able to hold his own here. So let's go back to the game now, and I'll show you the critical difference. So in this Queen's Gambit exchange variation, where black tries to mimic the play of the semi-tarish, right? E4 was played by Svidler here. Okay, taking the center. If black is going to give white the chance to take the center, then take it. So E4, knight takes C3, B takes C3, and C5. Now, here's the major difference. Notice that in the semi-tarish variation I showed you, the knight was already on F3. Okay? In this variation, the knight has not been played to F3 yet, and it's very critical because this extra move that white has, he doesn't have to play knight F3. Now, if he wants to transpose into a semi-tarish, he can play knight F3 here. But if he wants to avoid the trading of two sets of minor pieces, right, and retain better attacking chances by keeping the pieces on the board, he can do so by playing one of two moves. One is what Svidler played with rook B1. What does rook B1 do? After the trade C takes D4, there is no bishop B4 here. Okay? after queen a5 check, white can enter into a nice endgame with his space advantage or whatever, but it's even more enterprising to sacrifice this pawn by playing bishop d2, because we all should know from our early days of learning chess that just going around chasing pawns with the queen in the opening is not a good idea. And after queen takes a2, knight f3, white has a nice lead in development, and the position could get very dangerous for black here. So this move rook b1 eliminates one of the main options in for black, and one of the ideas that black chooses, the semi-terrace variation, which is to basically he gives white the center, but he trades off some pieces, and you know, to make his day at the office easier, so to speak. But in this variation where knight f3 is not played, white has the option of stopping that. So I told you there were two moves to stop that. Bishop b4 check. One was rook b1, which was played in the game, and the other is the move a3, which again you can see has the same idea. So for example, in the game Nakamura versus Kramnik, which took place in 2013, Nakamura played the move a3. This has the additional benefit of keeping the pawn on the A file from being captured. Remember, I showed you the variation of queen a5 check and bishop d2, and I was suggesting, hey, just gambit the pawn after in the rook b1 variation. Well, a3 doesn't gambit anything, and stops the idea of bishop b4 check after c takes d4, although a3 doesn't, you know, really assist in development. That's why I like rook b1 a little better. In that game, went g6, knight f3, bishop g7, and Nakamura went wild and played h4. He actually went on to win this game. But the basic idea that I'm, you know, sharing with you is that white is not forced to trade two sets of minor pieces as he would be in the semi-terrace. Okay, so he gets his center, and he gets to retain some of his, you know, his attacking chances, which he did in this game. So going back to the game, after knight c3, bishop takes c3, c5, rook b1 is played, and now you know one of the main ideas behind rook b1. And another idea, of course, it puts pressure on the b file, but again, the primary idea is after this c takes, this move is not happening, and you retain more pieces on the board, plus you had the big center. So I think my conclusion is that this is a healthier version, so to speak, of the semi-terrace, if we want to call it that. I mean, it's Queen's Gambit, decline, exchange variation, but people that play this are trying to get a similar position, and I think it's a worse position. I figure if you're going to play this, you might as well play the semi-terrace. And I also want to mention that Svidler has experience in this variation from the white side, and has played rook b1 before. So the endorsement is there from him, and you know, and Nakamura and other top grandmasters to play rook b1. This game right here is between Svidler and Etienne Becrot, French's #2, right, former #1 player, and this is from 2013, and I'll just run through it real briefly. So his c takes d4, c takes d4. Becrot has the black pieces, of course. Knight c6. Okay, and now with knight c6, be aware that, you know, the same idea can happen, and that's one of the positives of a3. Is a3 just basically kills the idea of a check on b4 period without a waste of time. But Svidler deals with this in a nice fashion. He simply plays bishop b5, pinning the knight. So a6, bishop takes c6, b takes c6, knight f3, c5, castles, bishop e7, bishop e3, c takes d4, knight takes d4, bishop d7, and white just has this small lead in development, and he uses it to great effect here. Queen g5 is, queen g4 is pretty risky here, because of the threat of e5 here. But if black plays e5, again being behind in development like that, usually those type of moves meet with some type of counter shot. And here knight f5 seems like a good move to play here, even if you might have to sacrifice material after, say, g6 and rook fd1. But just going on, because this is not our main game, bishop d7, queen g4, castles, rook fd1, queen e8, e5, king h8, h3, rook b8, queen e4, h6. The other rook moves to the c file, and rook b7, bishop a3, and now rook c3 attacking the bishop. So that was a lost tempo. And now rook c to c7, and we just see a domination of the white pieces. White pieces are very, very well centralized, and now the rooks are invading the 7th rank. So rook a7, the bishop moves, and this just causes the position to collapse. It's hard to come up with anything for black at this point, because knight c6. If he tries to protect this bishop, just simply knight c6. So just like that, just seemed like magic, Svidler was able to build up an overwhelming position. So Bacro played bishop a3, rook takes f7, rook takes f7, rook takes f7. So you figure he can just give up a pawn. Queen g8, queen f3, and of course there's this piece to worry about. There's discoveries such as bishop takes h6 and so on. And Bacro played bishop b2 and resigned immediately, because either rook f8 will be winning or bishop takes h6. So it's it's a just devastating victory over 2,700 players. So this is a dangerous situation to have. It's dealing with these big centers. You can't just allow your opponent to set it up nonchalantly. Alright, so that's enough of that. You all get the point. And now let's just go to the main presentation here. So now back to Svidler and Hou Yifan. So e4, knight takes, b takes, c5, rook b1, bishop e7, knight f3, castles, bishop c4, knight c6, and now white can castle himself, so he doesn't have to worry about that exchange of the second set of minor pieces. b6, and now Svidler makes an important decision. It's d5, knight a5, bishop d3, and now c4, bishop c2, and now white is going to have to manage an isolated pawn. And again, this is always an important decision, because you have to determine that your isolated pawn is going to be a symbol of strength before you take it on. Because if it's weak, the opponent will just blockade it and then harass it until it falls, or till you compromise your position in some other manner. Okay, so here Svidler feels that it's an asset. So e takes d5, bishop b7, and there we go. The siege against the pawn. Rook e1. Some tactics at play, so the pawn cannot be captured because the bishop on e7 is vulnerable. So bishop f6, getting out of the way of any rook takes e7 possibilities and attacking the pawn on c3. So the pawn moves d6, and right here to be considered is definitely bishop takes f3 because the queen would not be able to capture. The pawn will just drop. So g takes f3 would have to be played. And I don't know if this is too greedy for black to take this pawn, but it's interesting. And if it's bad, then again black doesn't have to take that pawn and maybe can do something more constructive. Maybe a move like queen d7, because I think it's important to try to tie this pawn up and win it if possible. So d6 was played, and bishop takes f3 was now played. Instead, I believe an inferior move to bishop takes f3 was played. I think that's probably the critical line there is bishop takes f3. But rook e8 was played. I can't knock it, but I just think bishop takes f3 was more of a test in a position. Because here Svidler is able to temporarily relieve the pressure on the d pawn after this exchange. So rook takes e8, queen takes e8, and now the pawn is not attacked. So he can do whatever he wants right for this second. He plays bishop f4. And I think an interesting move is also is bishop g5 here. And the idea here with bishop g5 is, let's say, for argument's sake, bishop takes f3 now, thinking you're just going to win the bishop on g5. Queen takes f3. Bishop g5. But now you got d7. Okay? Now you got to watch this rook here. So for instance, if the queen tried to come up off the back rank, then that rook would get captured. So now you got to play queen d8, for example. And then you got rook e1 with the idea of rook e8. So there's some nice nuances in that position. But Svidler opted for bishop f4, which is okay. He's protecting his asset, which is that passed pawn. Rook d8 and bishop f5, g6, d7, good move by Svidler. Queen f8, bishop jumps back, and now I have to say that white has a clear advantage because there's really no way for black to really be able to capture this pawn now. So that pawn is just a bone in the throat right now, and black is going to choke. That pawn is too far advanced, and it's heavily protected. Bishop e4 attacking the rook. Rook c1, queen c5, queen e2, bishop f5, and here Svidler plays rook d1, which is good. Bishop takes h3, g takes h3, and at this point the compromised pawn structure on the king side does not hurt Svidler. King g7, because that passed pawn is a monster at this point. Rook d6, bishop takes c3. Again, the passed pawn is the most important and overriding issue in the position, so it just shows you how good the white position is because he can just give up the pawn and it's not a big deal. Knight g5 and queen f5 by Hou Yifan. So after knight g5, there's a threat here. Actually, there's two threats here. Can you see them? You can pause the video if you want and analyze the threats. But don't worry, I'm here to help you through it. The threat here, actually, there's two. One is again, let's imagine if white can move again. That's a thing that, you know, a good practice is like when you get in certain positions. Imagine if you can move more than one time, or your opponent can move more than one time. That's a good way of finding his threats in the position, right? It's using your imagination to make more than one move for the opponent. Like if he could move 3 times in a row, like what would his best moves be, or what would he do? And you'll find a lot of threats like that. Here, if white can move again, you would play queen e7, right? It attacks the f7 pawn right here and threatens to just take this rook right off the board. That's one of the threats. The other is knight takes f7, which is more spectacular, but it has the same idea. So, for instance, after king takes f7, then queen e6, king g7, and queen e7. So the ideas are the same, and actually, black probably gets mated here. I didn't look that far. I just wanted to show you the threats here. So after knight g5, Hou Yifan sees the threat, of course, and rushes to the rescue and plays queen f5, which stops one of the threats. Which one does it stop? It stops knight takes f7, but it does not deal, and it cannot deal with the other threat, which is simply queen to e7. And that's what's great is when you're able to make one move and it's it's like a net and it covers like other areas. So here Svidler makes his move knight g5 and it has more than one threat, and black's position is not able to stand up to the scrutiny. So h6 is played here, and now there's pins. We have this opposition. I always talk about it, queen and king opposed, and here's like a thin veil separating the two. So of course Svidler plays knight e6 check, forking the king and the rook. King has to move because of the pin. King h7, and then knight takes d8, queen takes f4, and of course knight takes f7 with the protection of the g5 square, so the king can't even check there. And if the king did check on c1, then just simply king g2, because eventually this discovery is going to hurt. And finally, the victorious passed pawn will emerge as a queen. So that is it. That was round 9 of the FIDE Grand Prix in Geneva, and it ended with a nice victory for Peter Svidler in the Queen's Gambit Decline exchange variation. So let's just sum up the basic lesson with that variation is that it is similar to the semi-terrace defense, but let me say that in my opinion it is slightly inferior because white has more options. He doesn't have to play knight f3. He has to move rook b1 or a3, which stops black from being able to exchange 2 sets of minor pieces. He only can exchange 1 set, which is when he plays knight from d5 to c3, and helps white erect his big center. So this in turn gives white more attacking chances, and we just observed 2 devastating games by Peter Svidler. Here's another 31 move demolition right here against a strong grandmaster in Hou Yifan. And so if you're gonna play against the exchange variation, maybe you should just take back with the pawn. But again, there's many grandmaster games in this variation, and but it's just something to look out for. I hope you enjoyed that video. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.